Oh, that should be down. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the very first sessions of J Cal and Jeremiah Plunkett, because it's not just me. No. It's JP as well. Mr. Jeremiah Plunkett, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
Good. If you've never watched this podcast before, there's a hallmark that there's always got to be some sort of error starting the show. Sometimes the mic is muted. Sometimes the camera's not working. Sometimes you leave a graphic up longer than you're supposed to.
Yeah, I got really scared that we're going to do this entire podcast looking at my face. I mean, we really technically are, but
yeah, I was going to say we're still looking at your face. So yeah, man, this is the big introduction. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into the sessions with J Cal. Each and every time we bring you a sessions, I like to talk NWA with somebody past, present, or future of the National Wrestling Alliance. Of course, I'm talking to Jeremiah Plunkett, who represents really the past, the present, and the future of the NWA, as you'll see him weekly on NWA Power, Tuesday, 6:05 on Fight TV, or Fridays at, 6:05 also
as well,
Eastern.
Yes.
And then, of course, you can check him on NWA USA when you occasionally pop up on that program as well. Still pretty much one of my favorite parts of this current version of the NWA is that the hallmarks to the past were not forgotten. We always hear about, of course, the road that brought us here. Tim Storm is revered as a hero. Jack Stane is the national champion, the North American champion, the tag team champion, the former world champion. And a guy like you, who people might not know, your history with the NWA is very tied. A lot of your career has been working for various NWA promotions over the years, before, obviously, the Lightning One era consolidated, but even for a very long time working with promotions in that Mid-South area. And you're a dude who, not only do I enjoy your work, but having had the pleasure of speaking to you in public, you're just a heck of a dude. So I'm really happy to have you on the show.
I can't do that introduction any kind of justice. That was awesome, man. Yeah, I guess it did spend a lot of time. I was thinking about it when we were first talking about this, and I'm like, I didn't spend that much time working for the NWA, but I guess really I did. But I think I was only following the NWA, as it were, when I was working at SAW, I feel like, because I saw the inner workings going on behind, whereas it was just three letters when I'd pop in at NWA Chattanooga or NWA Main Event or something like that, because it was just a once every couple month thing that I might do there, whereas SAW was a regular weekly town.
Well, when you were doing those stadium in shows in Nashville as Jay Phoenix, I mean,
no,
USWO was representing that National Wrestling Alliance. I know it wasn't at that point in time in history in 2008, but I mean, it wouldn't be long before the USWO was co-promoting events with the, I'm trying to think. I know the abbreviation was ATL, but I don't remember what the ATL stood for.
No one ever knew. Legitimately. And we would ask and I use this term extremely loosely, promoter, Bill DeShields, I believe his name was, but we'd ask him and he'd be like, if you ever find out, there's a reward. He was a weird guy.
It was like an Easter egg, and no one ever discovered it.
Yeah, no, ever.
That's awesome. See, something you did not know. And those shows were co-promoted. I mean, that's kind of what gave birth to the NWA Cyberslam, which that to me was a vessel unto itself. I wish YouTube was more prevalent back in those days, because I feel like that show got slept on. And at the time there was Smoky Mountain TV, and Smoky Mountain, obviously, this kind of predated what they were doing at the Sawmill. But, there's Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And then you had this Cyberslam program in the middle of Tennessee. and it's such just a weird combination of characters. I mean, that's the first time I believe I saw Josephus. I saw the Cliffhanger. I saw yourself. Uh, Tell me about Cyberslam and how did that happen? What do you know about it, anyways? I mean, I know you were a talent, not so much a producer, but tell me about that.
So from my recollection, Cyberslam was kind of like it was Mike Cersei with NWA Top Rope.
Yeah.
And Tim Thomason or Kroll, who was, I mean, he was the mastermind behind like a lot of the USWO stuff, like as far as the booking. Tony Falk was a promoter. Kroll did a lot of the booking and a lot of the TV. And then Sawmill, like Inferno, all Kroll. All Kroll, 100%. So that was kind of like them getting together on a project. And Kroll would get in with projects as he loved doing TV production. So he'd get in on projects. USWO had a show. As we're talking about NWA Cyberslam, even though it was pretty short-lived from what I remember.
It was.
Then, of course, SAW, both versions, NWA SAW and Southern All-Star Wrestling when it was a bit syndicated. Has he done anything since? He worked with it was NWA New South for a moment, but it was toward the buyout when that split. But New South Wrestling in Franklin, Kentucky, they had a TV show too. So he'll get in with promotions and like they'll do TV for a while.
You know, it's wild because you know, I've been fortunate out here in Southern California that we've had locally produced pro wrestling for a couple of years now with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. You know, where we have TV wrestling, studio style TV wrestling. How is it out there in Tennessee? Do you have a lot of up and down? Do you have a lot of programming, or is it just kind of is it more rare? Is it something that you guys get a lot of?
Right now, I don't think there's anything, at least in the Middle Tennessee area. I can't think of any independent wrestling on TV at all. When I was getting in or thinking about getting into wrestling, we had a couple. So on a public access channel here in the Middle Tennessee area, it was actually the MTSU channel, Middle Tennessee State University. So they got time on their public. So they had a student who had to be the director and everything so that they could get on. And it was called WMF Medium Rare, and there's a bunch of guys doing hardcore stuff in an armory. But it was actually the first independent show I ever went to. And then we had Burt Prentice, who had TV forever. USWO Late Night would come on at a public access channel at like 3 a.m. on a Wednesday or some crazy time slot that nobody except us drunk college kids ever saw. If you count USWA in the early to late 90s, maybe, but it depends on if you count that or not. And I feel like I'm missing something besides SAW, when obviously SAW started. But yeah, past that, I can't think of anything else in years.
Yeah. Well, look.
NWA Main Event. Sorry, NWA Main Event. I forgot about that one.
Mike Porter, right?
Right. Yeah.
Have any good stories about Mike Porter?
I worked for Mike a few times. So my trainers were like Mike Woods, Buzzed Up, and Lee Condrey. All three of them worked for NWA Main Event, almost exclusively there for a while. Mike was always fine to me. What good? I do know I booked for him for one time, so you know he was doing bad if he was letting my green butt at the time book for him, and I was getting paid, and no one else was getting paid or had ever been paid by Mike Porter. That was always a thing. You don't get paid if you work for Mike, but I was getting paid, and I was like, all right, that's weird, but I'm going to accept it. And then I think come to find out, either one or a couple people on the show were giving Mike money to give me to do this. I found that out well after the fact. And the only other weird Mike story I have, and I don't know if I could even tell it.
Well, there's no rating on here, so
it was mainly just the fact I the first night I ever wrestled for him, post just being a green guy that my trainers brought in a time or two. I asked him, I ask any promoter, especially the first time I work for him, hey, was everything all right? Everything good for you? He goes, yeah. He goes, I do have one question. Then I go, what's that? Let me preface by saying Mike is openly gay. But he's like, do you stuff your trunks? He goes, no. He goes, you want me to teach you how? And that was that. And then, so I play it off and I laugh. And then I shake his hand and I get the old finger inside the palm gimmick. But like that, That's the only thing he ever did, though. Like he always kidded, but he'd tell me some great stories. I always try to pick guys like that's brain who's been around a while. But Mike was always fine with me. We had a dust up one time, and it was just yelling, and then like wrestling time heals wounds, and I'm in taking bumps for him again.
Yeah. You mentioned Burt Prentice, and interesting about that area. There's a lot of promoters who are openly gay. Not that there's, I'm completely cool with that. And I don't want anyone to judge that, but like, I know he had some wild stories in that territory. Is there anything that you want to talk about on that one, or?
Never with me. Never with me. Not as type. Hanging out at a Mexican restaurant one night, he flat out told me, he goes, "You never would have to worry about me being attracted to you." And I go, "Sweet, cool, Bert."
That's
Bert's another one. Like, was always good to me. We did have a dust up for many years, and we actually cleared the air about a year ago. It was sometime during lockdown, because I remember just being in my fields one night and hitting up Bert and apologizing for the dust up we had, and it was prophetic because then he died like 6 months later.
I mean, at least you got that opportunity to shut the door on that, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
we'd all heard the stories, but like, unless I see it, I'm not going to say it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
For sure. But like, you kind of were just everywhere in Middle Tennessee, and that's what I find fascinating. I'll be honest, I've been to Nashville twice, or I guess technically 3 times. I'm not super familiar with the state of Tennessee. I drove from from Nashville to Oak Ridge once, and I'll never want to take that drive again. I remember just coming up over to the hillside, and there was this just huge Confederate flag, and I was like, wow, all right, we're no longer in Nashville. Tell me about like, let's start with how you got into wrestling, because obviously every pro wrestler today started off as a fan. It wasn't just something that fell into your lap. You probably grew up watching pro wrestling. Is that true? Did you grow up watching pro wrestling?
Yeah. My earliest memory of pro wrestling is watching it and having toys of it when I was, like 5 years old. The first time I ever said I would like to learn how to do this was being 10 years old, and I discovered, oh my good gracious, I saw it popped up on the screen. Sorry. But no, to be 10 years old, and I was watching USWA, and Lawler was coming back, for a Monday night in Memphis. So they recycled one of the old USWA music videos from back in the day, and it's just filled with Lawler throwing fireballs. So 10-year-old me goes, I want to learn how to throw fireballs. I have to be a wrestler to do that. They obviously teach that in wrestling school.
101.
Yeah, first day, right? It's hip tosses and fireballs.
Do you have to prime your hand? Like, you have to take the ropes a certain way. Like, do you have to strike it on your hand the right way?
Certain secrets won't tell.
That's behind the scenes. You got to pay extra for that one.
Yeah. Hey, fire is one thing that, like, I'm one of the few who still do from time to time. So I don't want to tell anybody about it so I can keep it.
So when Alex Taylor says, I grew up watching JP, you did that to me too when we were in Nashville, and you said, I've been watching your podcast since I was in high school. You instantly aged me by 40 years.
And then thinking back, it may have been a bit of a stretch. It may have been like my senior year of high school or early on in wrestling. But I do remember, because while being a child of the internet, I've never been like obsessed with the internet. So I didn't know about a message board. And then I saw message boards. And then when I started working for NWAs, I know for sure I would Google stuff to get more information. And that's where I like the Alliance blog. I only knew you, as funny, as a poster that I would see on there. I didn't realize like this was your deal until like the SAW days.
Well, that's cool. And I think first of all, thank you. It's not like I'm reaching out for validation, but it's cool to know that somebody who got into the business was checking out my stuff early on, and that makes me feel pretty good. The whole point of all of it was I started blogging about the NWA because nobody else was talking about it. Like there's a promotion in Atlanta or Georgia. There's a promotion in Tennessee. There's actually 3 of them. There's a promotion in California. There's stuff going on in Texas. There's stuff going on in Portland. There's so much stuff going on, and nobody's talking about it. And I was like, well, how could we funnel this into one spot? And at first I had a few people helping me, and then it was just me, literally. All right, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, where can I find any information? I used to go to a page I think you might be familiar with, the Mid-Southern Wrestling Message Board, and I would read all the Trent's posts and trying to see what I could gather from what's going on in Tennessee to put something together up on the website. Did you ever check out that Mid-Southern Wrestling Message Board?
Oh, yeah. So Trent Van Dries, the scourge of Nashville. No, man, so it's so funny because I feel like I came in at a time when the business was starting to change. Like, you still had the old territory guys who were still going and giving it one last go. You know what I mean? But then you had this new crop of talent coming in. And you had mentioned something about, like, as all wrestlers nowadays, you grew up a fan. And I do think that's one thing about, like, my generation, and probably a little bit before my generation too, is like, everyone back in the day was like, they used to be a football player and then they hurt their knees and then became a pro wrestler. They're a bodybuilder, got discovered in a gym, something. I don't want to say there are very few fans, but it wasn't everybody was a fan.
Right.
Whereas now everybody getting in for the most part, there's still people you get popped up into NXT, but usually they're even fans too. They just never thought about doing it.
Right.
So I do think. So I think I was on this like middle generation where I learned, like, I wrestled Gypsy Joe, for God's sake. So, I mean, I had these old school encounters. I rode the roads with Tracy a little bit. So, like, I got to meet and wrestle idols that I studied, and then I'd share a car with them. It was crazy. But those guys did not like message boards.
No.
So early on, I'd read the message boards, but you never talked about it, and you always hated them. But then you realize it was used for advertisement, one. And two, I only had a couple conversations with Trent, but like, he had points. He had points in his opinions. And I think once I opened up my mind to that, I had a totally different outlook on it.
Yeah.
But I remember the guys complaining about, the smart mark message boards and all that stuff.
It's kind of funny because so, that's what you guys had out there in Middle Tennessee. In Southern California, we had SoCal Uncensored. And I mean, people won't admit to it, but I mean, Samoa Joe was posting on there. Adam Pearce was posting on there. And, even Joey Ryan was posting on there. And I know we don't talk about Joey Ryan, but the way that those guys marketed themselves early on, in those early days, and were able to gather, gain that following, whether it be Pierce or Joe or the other Joe, they just kind of galvanized their own fan base right there on a message board. And I think that speaks to the volume of how the internet can be used for good. And, things have changed. Back then, there wasn't a Facebook or a MySpace or Twitter or Instagram. So to keep up with wrestling, that's what you had to do. Because it's not covered on the mainstream. It never has been. Well, I mean, it hasn't been in many, many years. So in order to keep up with wrestling, those message boards were kind of like what kept things alive for a lot of us for a long time. So I think it's cool that you guys had one out there. And it's the same thing. Like, older guys didn't want anything to do with it, but the younger crowd kind of understood, like, hey, this is an opportunity to get myself over.
Yeah, and I don't think the Mid-South message board was ever utilized to the potential that you're just talking about of SoCal Uncensored being used, because I don't think anybody ever, like, we'd advertise a show on it, you know what I mean? But that's about as much as it went. And then it'd be conversations about things, but nobody was posting like, hey, here's my match to develop a fan base on there.
Yeah.
That I can remember anyway. And that's brilliant forethought to think to do that, though, because you are essentially building your own fan base right there.
I whenever I'm talking to wrestling, I look at each and every one of you wrestlers, not just as a performer, not just as a wrestler, but as a business. You're your own entity. And yes, you're working for the NWA right now, but prior to that, I mean, you were your own thing. And if you wanted to work everywhere in Tennessee, you could. And if you didn't have to. And if you're selling t-shirts, you're selling 8x10s, you're selling this brand that you have. and you have to build it up somehow, some way. If it's not on a national television or at least a regional program, how else are people going to find you? Now, that's what's great about social media today is everybody is a brand and everybody can advertise in any way they want to. But, just even 10 years ago, it was harder to get to get that exposure that it's so easily available today.
Yeah, the tools are out there. You just got to use them and learn how to work with them. I'm the worst at social media. I hate it. It can be really, really, really exhausting. So you'll see a lot of my stuff will be retweeting or posts about business. I've made a promise to myself that I really won't like read comments and stuff like that because it's just hard. You know what I mean? Like, because people say good things and then one person will be like, yeah, he's fat. And I'll just think about that the whole time. Oh, he's fat. And then I'll get depressed and order a pizza and get fatter. So,
well, in the thing about it, you're right. Because I mean, it's a very toxic environment. And it's hard. That's like, and I salute the guys over at This Is the Pro Wrestling Podcast, Gary, Doc, and Will, because they've been helping to cultivate a very positive environment for the NWA fans. We've been doing that over here too. But I mean, look, we don't always have the nicest things to say on this podcast either. We try to keep it real, and it's not to hurt anybody's feelings, but sometimes that's what happens. It's all more about like, hey, this could be better, or we think this could be better. And that's what we would like to see. Because this is a brand whoever's watching this podcast right now is a fan of the NWA, period. You don't find this podcast if you don't give a shit about the National Wrestling Alliance. It's just, you don't. So, there is a lot of toxicity on the internet. There's especially when it comes to, body image and everything else. But, we try to keep a very pro NWA mindset, but also having, we have our ticks and quips and all that stuff too. But, there's been a few questions in the chat, and I want to throw some of these questions up here for you so that you can answer, and then we'll get back to just talking about wrestling. Sure. Bobby Petito says, what's your favorite match at the NWA that you've had? And I think he means of all NWA, not just what's been going on recently, but what's your favorite match?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and break it up into the two. If we're talking pre-Lightning One, obviously it would have to be, I've got the poster hanging up. It's one of the few posters I have hanging up. It's being Satoshi Kojima for the 10 pounds of gold. I'm proud of that for multiple reasons, not just the fact that it was a match for the 10 pounds gold, but also huge Japanese wrestling fan. So, Satoshi Kojima, that was a dream for me. And then the fact that someone in the previous regime did not want me to have that match. Said, I don't want to say said because I didn't see the messages. I got it secondhand. But alluded to the fact that it would not draw. And that is the reason, from my understanding, that why on the DVD, if you see it, Kojima wrestled 2 matches that night. And mine was not up top. The one up top was never advertised. I did all the press work for that, and we sold that some bitch out. Might as well steal the Ricky Morton phrase. So I was really proud of that for that reason. And then because of it, Kojima having to do double duty, we could only go like 15. So that was a little heartbreaking too. But I got the experience. It was cool. I knew that our match sold that house because I was the only picture on that flyer. So I was really, really proud of that. And to just have Kojima, I introduced myself and he go, "Oh yes, I watch you on Plane," and I'm like, "You watched my stuff? Sweet."
That's got to be humbling, right?
Yeah, dude. Mind blowing was more like it. Like, I 100% expected to go in there and be like, "All right, you go do this, and this. Don't waver from." He's like, "No, I've watched it. I've got ideas," and I'm like, "Hey, all right, man."
See,
he was cool.
That's when you kind of wish you had an entourage just filming everything that you did that day. Is that I'm sure that would have been almost as entertaining as the match because you got, Kojima, and I got to meet him one time, and we're not best friends or by any stretch, but having watched that guy's career, as someone who came over to the States early in his career, worked with MLW, did a lot of those shows with Steve Corino and those guys. Won the title, then went back to Japan, became a Triple Crown champion, also winning the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. And I know it's a little bit further removed from his prime, but then when he's NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, in a time where the NWA didn't have a ton of star power, that guy was a superstar. And it wasn't just in Japan. He did come to the States and wrestle. And I thought, number one, that was cool as everything. Because Kojima is a guy who certainly had value even in New Japan then. So for him to come to the States and wrestle in Tennessee and wrestle in Texas, and those matches that he had were very special. And you got to be one of those guys. And that's not to discredit you, because I mean, if we pull up your resume, and a lot of people don't realize it, you were one of the bigger guys in that area. Absolutely, you should have been in that match. But the fact that you got to wrestle a superstar, a guy who's a New Japan star, that's awesome. And I was always so excited for you for that. And, as somebody who's been kind of cheering you on remotely over here in Southern California, I was like, hell yeah, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. And you're right, when that match aired, like I saw it on YouTube, and that crowd was hot for you guys.
Yeah, it was nuts. And having Tracy there was big. And knowing that someone else was figured in for that role, somebody that I know, but don't have the relationship I had with Tracy and the person wanted a certain price and they didn't want to come off of it. And Tracy had heard about it, and Tracy came down for way too little to do that, to do those training montages. He showed up early. We shot montages. He beat the crap out of me for real in those montages because he's Tracy and he had one speed. So to have him there was everything. And to the point, this will tell you, I love telling Tracy some other stories. So we're doing the meet and greet prior to this, and I've got my 8x10s out, trying to make a little money beforehand. And Tracy sits up next to me, and he goes, hey, whatever, what was it? He said, if you buy anything, he had 4x6 pictures of him and Steve Austin and, him and the people he's met through the travels. You buy anything from me, you get one of these pictures, Tracy will sign. And I'm like, Tracy, you ain't got to do that, but I'll split the money with you. And he goes, no, I'm here to help you. The man. The whole time I'm warming up before the match, he's coming up and giving me an orange, because he is notorious. You got to drink water. Now you got to have an orange for vitamin C. Take this multivitamin. Do some shadow. He had this regimen, right? And he was running me through the regimen. So he was making sure I was legit, just ready.
So he wasn't just there. I mean, he was there.
Yeah. That's always been Tracy. No matter, it could be the worst show ever. You tell him his role, he's there.
That's awesome, man. I had no idea. That's a great story.
Yeah, Tracy was a man.
So that's a great answer. And I wanted to delve into that too. Because again, when you said that somebody in the office didn't want that match to happen, I felt like the office did so much back then. The whole cut your nose to spite your face phrase. I feel like they did so many things that it didn't make sense to me as a fan. And part of the reason why I was happy to see ownership change hands, because a guy like you who had that match with Kojima should have been celebrated. And, I like Damian Wayne a lot. And he certainly deserved a shot too, but it didn't need to be on the same night. Could have been somewhere else. Could have been something else.
Yeah. And it wasn't I was literally just happened to be riding a wave right then. We just happened to be doing a storyline and it really got over. And that's the time the match was coming in. And at the time I was, the TV champion or whatever, and the guy who was in line for it and the people wanted it. So that's the only reason it was. And I realized that, but I'm really happy that Mark Houch and Tim Thomas had fought for me. You know what I mean? Because they did not want it to be me. I say they. From what I'm told, it's specifically one of them. Won't out them because, again, I haven't seen the messages. This is all from other people. But one of them I'm friends with on social media today. So that might tell you something. But
I won't spill any beans. But I know one thing I do know is that they changed the outcome of the 10 pounds of gold match in Glassboro, New Jersey, because they thought that too many fans on my message board knew who would become champion next and thought, well, we can't do that. So they changed it to swerve the fan base. And I thought that was such a missed opportunity and for the dumbest reasons possible because, in full transparency, because 20 people on a message board thought that they knew what was going to happen. That's why you swerved the audience. And the guy that got swerved really did deserve that title. Like I'll go to bat for Damian Wayne. He should have been champion that night. And that's again one of the craziest decisions I ever heard. The NWA pulling him out of that, winning that title.
Yeah, no, there was some weirdness leading up to it, to the point where in my head I'm like, it's probably not going to happen. I'll get there, and then last second it'll get pulled. I was prepared for it the entire time.
Jesus, that would have totally taken the sail out of my, taking the wind out of my sail. If I had been in that position, I mean, what do you do if they do that? Like, you just walk out of the arena, or I mean,
what I probably would have done, because I read the old territory books, right? Like I read Brody's biography and stuff like that. I would have left, but I would have waited till the entire crowd was there, and I would have walked out and walked around the ring and then left, so everybody saw me leave.
So they knew that you didn't no-show.
Yeah, young wrestling fans don't listen, or young wrestlers don't listen to me. But at the time, probably what I would have done.
Or listen so that they could get the edge, right?
Maybe.
Another question that popped up, and we'll get to your next answer too here in a minute. But the next question is, who's your biggest influence for your in-ring work?
There's a few. I watch a lot of Jerry Lawler. Obviously, that's like, this is the guy I saw throwing fire, so I'm like, I need to watch this guy. Jerry Lawler, and then so we didn't have cable for a long time growing up, so I'd see the syndicated shows. So I'd see WCW. I forgot what their Saturday morning show was in the mid '90s. Gosh, Worldwide maybe.
Worldwide.
Yeah. Okay. So on Worldwide, that's where I'd see Arn Anderson, because they had him on Worldwide for some reason. But I loved Arn Anderson. I loved Bobby Eaton. And here's the thing: didn't know about their past. I'm 10 years old. I'm not a tape trader, so I don't realize they're two of the greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. They're both two of the greatest TV champions of all time. I don't realize that. I just realize, hey, these guys who aren't winning a lot, let me throw out there. Arn maybe a little bit. No, I think he's still losing a lot. But like Bobby was really just going out there and putting guys over.
Right.
But I'm like, these guys who aren't winning a lot, but I can tell somehow in my 10-year-old mind, there's something that sticks out to me. I was going to say I could tell they're a better wrestler, but I couldn't. But like, I could tell that there was something different about them. Right. So those two. And then as I became more knowledgeable and started watching a lot of tape, then that's like where Terry Funk came in. I love Terry Funk. And then as a dark horse thrown in here, I watch a lot of All Japan, like early 90s All Japan. So Jumbo Tsuruta is, if I can make it to be a beat up old man, Jumbo's 90s run is what I want to be. I just want to beat up old guys, beating up young guys, and trying to keep my spot.
When you said Terry Funk, I had two visions pop into my head. I had the Terry Funk who was holding the 10 pounds of gold, had the 3 stars on the trunks, and then I pictured Terry Funk beating the crap out of Ric Flair because Flair wouldn't give him that world title shot. Which Terry Funk were you talking about? Which one? Is it the 10 pounds of gold, the champion, or was it bitter, angry Terry Funk? Which one were you?
First Terry Funk I ever saw was Chainsaw Charlie.
Oh, yeah, I forget that you're a little bit younger than me.
But that's not my Terry Funk, but that's the first Terry Funk I ever saw. My favorite Terry Funk is probably around beat up Ric Flair is my favorite Terry Funk. 10 pounds of gold Terry Funk, it depended on what territory he's working and who he's working with. Because he could be just as technical as Dory, or he could go down to Florida and work with the Dream and be absolutely insane, or go to Memphis and work with Lawler and be absolutely insane. He had such great range. Like, he could do whatever.
Well, and then all that, and then come to California and work like Mil Mascaras and do like a lucha / scientific wrestling match. It would blow everyone's mind.
Yeah, but then there would always be a point, even when he get really technical, where he'd get a little crazy toward the end. Like if it looked like he was about to lose his title, even as a babyface, he'd go a little mad, and he was the best.
Yeah, now you make me want to go do a deep dive on Terry Funk, man.
I used to get, I had a buddy who would get torrents and like just torrent these giant collections and burn them for me. So I've got a Terry Funk thing that has like 40 matches on it, and I've got an Arn Anderson one, the same thing. So those are probably my two most watched DVDs.
I mean, and look, those are two guys that certainly have left their mark in the business. Let's move now to more modern NWA because the question was, what's your favorite match in the NWA? You're in a different role now with the National Wrestling Alliance with the Ill Begotten. You kicked out my pal Yuma, which don't get me wrong, man. I get why. It just kind of makes me sad. But I know that
it wasn't just me; it was a group decision.
That decision didn't get made till you started showing up, though.
Well, I mean, if you watch when I first came in, things were fine, but we had a couple Zoom meetings, and this had been planned before I came in.
So what match are you proudest of currently in your run with the Lightning One era?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking probably it would be a little pre-Ill Begotten, but it was wrestling Strictly Business with Sean Daivari. I got to touch with the top guys who were at the top of the card.
I mean, when you came in, and I was one of the guys, like, I knew who you were. So when you showed up, I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. You're going to work some of these guys. You're going to help some of these guys get better in the ring. I don't want to use the word enhancement, but, you're going to be there. And we use this term on this show all the time, steel sharpens steel. So when you're in the ring with some of these guys who are newer, like a Rush Freeman or an Alex Taylor or a Jordan Clearwater, or Slice Boogie, or, you're going to help get these guys to where they need to be. And so it was fun watching you come in and, you had that match with Luke Hawx and that number one contendership. I think that was one of my favorite matches because I really felt like you went all out in that match to try to get that spot. And it was a very good match. And Luke is great too. But I mean, seeing you in that opportunity, you were used the right way. You were used as a guy who's trying to get to that championship title belt, and I really enjoyed that match. Hats off to you for that one.
I appreciate that. No, Luke is awesome. Luke is, I mean, he muscled my big butt up for that power slam off the top. Good God.
So, about your role in the NWA today, I mean, you're again part of the Ill Begotten. You're kind of like the coach. You're like the player coach, because you kind of help the guys, but also, like, I've seen you, hang out ringside like a manager. How would you define your role in the NWA as it is currently?
Man, I like to call myself I call myself a journeyman legitimately, but I'll do whatever's asked of me, whatever I need to do. I mean, you want to put me on the outside in a managerial role, I'll do it, but I'm just as good in there throwing shots and taking flatbacks, and listen, if I'm going to give this a run, I'm going to give it all I got. Whatever they put me in.
Did you? I mean, you've been in the ring with all the big names of this era of the NWA. Is there one name that sticks out more than the others? I mean, standing across the ring from Trevor Murdoch against somebody you probably watched on TV early in your career. Standing in the ring with Jack Stane, who, I mean, he's done it all in the NWA. Is there anybody that stands out more than anyone else?
You hit it on the head right at the beginning, Trevor. And there's a little bit more than that. Yes, I did watch him. I was a giant fan of him and Lance Cade. I'm a massive fan of him and Lance Cade. I guess this would be after he was back on the independents and I was just getting started. I sent him a Facebook message about, just working as a bigger guy, you know what I mean? And how to, when you don't have God, how do you say this? When you don't have the bodybuilder physique, how do you still show your wares? How do you still, and so I sent it to him, not expecting anything back. And I'll be honest, I didn't get anything back. First tapings for NWA, come up and introduce myself. And he goes, I know who you are. You sent me an email years ago. And he goes, and I just didn't know how to answer you. he goes, I can answer you now. Never blow up. And I'm like, all right, sweet.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah, it is weird moments like that, and so that's why that one sticks out. And then I finally get to wrestle him, and it was amazing.
Everything you anticipated?
He's all man. That's exactly what I thought he would be. You know what I mean?
He's a student of Harley Race. I don't imagine he'd be anything less than that. I imagine if he wants to. I know pro wrestling is a scripted sport. I'm not ignorant. I'm not trying to say anything, but I think that's one of the few guys that's actually out there that if he really had a problem with you, you'd know it right away.
To paraphrase a Harley line, if he hits you with his right and you don't go down, he's going to walk around you and see what's holding you up. He's a heavy hitter, man.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, I'm looking at the clock and I don't want to go too long, but we got to talk about your run in Australia. We got to talk about the NWA Australian Championship. I mean, again, you were a part of an NWA. You were there when the ownership changed from Pro Wrestling Organization to International Wrestling Corporation, whatever it was. Basically, the transition from the old regime to Bruce Tharp and his partners. And that was a very weird time for the NWA. A lot of promotions were gone, just left. Some of them were kicked out. Some of them were left out. And then, in Australia specifically, a new promotion came to fruition. And a lot of people had problem with this promotion early on, the AIW, but eventually they came to be known as, the NWA in Australia. And you somehow managed to be their heavyweight champion out here in the United States, in Tennessee. Tell us how you become the Australian heavyweight champion.
I will say this. I said, don't listen to me earlier, young wrestlers. Do it on this one. Always be nice to people. 1 year, this was when me and Drew Haskins were doing our Untouchables run, doing our tag run. And in other countries, you get, longer holidays mandated by the government or whatever. So the Aussie boys would, when they took their vacation, they'd come over to the States and wrestle. So there's not as many opportunities over there. So they come to the States and wrestle a whole bunch. So they came through SAW. And I remember Shark Carter, he had hit me up, and not knowing I'm from Adam, but saying, hey, who do I need to contact for SAW? Okay, cool. Got him in touch. So we ended up wrestling two of them that night. And then I think LT Falk wrestled Chris Target. And they were just going to go home, go back to the hotel and maybe do some stuff in the morning. Drew Haskins and I used to enjoy the nightlife a bit. And we actually were not planning to that night. But we're like, let's show these boys a good time. So we took them downtown Nashville, carried them back to their car. Well, not their car, let me say, to a ride. But no, we showed them a good time. And then to the point where early the next year, Shark had sent Drew and I a message about, hey, would you guys like to come to Australia sometime? And absolutely we would. And we knew by this point that any marketing to be done or any defending of NWA titles outside of SAW would have to be done by us. And we always wanted to grow things. We took the Southern Tag Team titles and went other places and just, defended them and would do some hokey NWA finish. You know what I mean? And leave their guys standing strong. All the old, I had a rule book printed up with a logo on it. Did the whole Carney thing. But so I'm like, no, man, that's awesome. That would be great for me and Drew, because we were really trying to do this tag thing. And then Drew's wife got pregnant and he left the business. And I went into singles run. So then it ended up being, well, do you still want to go? Well, sure. They come over that summer. And then we just hooked up some bookings, and I ended up dropping they ended up dropping the heavyweight title to me, which I didn't take that, and the TV title, do the same thing, Carney business everywhere. And then, cause they wanted to try to elevate their Australian title too. I don't know if I did anything about that, but
I mean, look, it's significant when any title travels, right? I mean, obviously the 10 pounds of gold, it's built on traveling. It's built on being seen everywhere. But when you have like for here in Southern California, the Heritage Championship, or I mean, this replica that sits behind me here, this British Commonwealth Championship, that was a title that was held by Drew Onyx and Finn Balor and Carl the Machine Gun Anderson, and all of it happened in Southern California. All these title changes, and and they argued, oh, the British Commonwealth is California was part of the British Commonwealth because it was part of the United States. It all counts. But it was cool. And I felt like that helped elevate the title. And the fact that, on Australian titles coming to the United States, that certainly has credibility to it. I mean, at the very least, the belt traveled. It means something. It traveled. Someone in Tennessee wanted an opportunity to wrestle for that title, and you did it. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and went back and did some business and got to go to Australia on somebody else's dime after that. So, I mean, you can't beat that. Australia is awesome.
Yeah,
I told my parents when I came back, if I didn't have family here, I'd be gone. Australia is amazing.
Well, and it's like an 18-hour flight.
So it's probably 18 if you're flying direct. If you're trying to save your buddies some money and you take all the layovers in the world, it comes out to about 33.
Where did you stop at?
Nashville to LaGuardia. Then took a transportation over to Kennedy to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Perth.
Wow. Wow.
So sleeping on airport floors, man.
So did you actually leave the airport when you were in Hong Kong?
No, it was a 6-hour layover. I wasn't going to even try to miss that and be stuck.
Oh God. We when I went to China with Nick to defend the 10 pounds ago, I mean, I didn't defend it, but I was there. When he went to China, we stopped in Shanghai, and we had an hour layover before they flew us to Wenzhou, and it was so crazy. And being in such a, it's foreign land, foreign language. I mean, even the signs were different. It just, I don't blame you for not even stepping outside of the airport, let alone
the Hong Kong airport was pretty Americanized, though. I will say that. Like, there would be an English sign somewhere.
The Shanghai, not so much, at least not in my experience. And I had my phone. It had Google Translate on it, except for I didn't have service in Hong Kong. So I was like, "Is there a Wi-Fi somewhere? Can I?" No.
That is where this is how much of a redneck I am. This is how where I first realized that ramen wasn't just what poor people in the water. Like I bought ramen and I'm like, this is delicious.
This is amazing.
There's something besides noodles.
Well, you see, that's what when you're doing it at home, you just got to crack an egg in there, and it classes it up so much.
Crack an egg, some mixed vegetables, you're good.
Yeah, it's like you're eating a real thing. So let's go back in time then, because we did talk about the Australian Championship. And I mean, that's still just an awesome story, being able to. Well, wait, let's go back to Australia. What did you do while you were there? Because I know you didn't just wrestle. Did you get to pet a kangaroo? Did you ride a wallaby? I mean,
I did not ride a wallaby.
Did the dingo eat your baby?
We went to a zoo. It's not like the kangaroos are out running. I'll probably get hate for this. Also ate kangaroo meat. They sell it in the grocery stores. I didn't go. But let's see. Tried Vegemite. So learned all the rules for Australian football, which I promptly forgot a lot of, but become a big fan. Actually, so I'm in I call this the multi-room because it's my wife's crafting room, plus my office, plus my workout room, plus storage. But like over my computer, I've got the Richmond Tigers, which is the people who housed me, the Davis family. It's they belong. So they're like the Packers. You know how you can buy shares?
Yeah.
They're like that, except like you're actually a member of the shareholders. Like it actually means something. Unlike the Packers, which I'm a massive Packers fan, but it means nothing. But so they gave me they get scarves every year that they pay their dues. So I've got one of the scarves hanging up. So I'm a unofficial Richmond Tigers fan because their captain had a giant mullet, and I thought that was the coolest.
A party in the front.
Played some Aussie rules ball, like not just kicked it around, tossed it around. played some cricket, and it took them about an hour to tell me, no, you don't hit the ball as hard as humanly possible. You're supposed to like bunt it. I'm just here trying to crack home runs with a cricket bat. Went to some nightclubs and stuff like that. Like, they just kind of showed me around town. It was amazing. It was awesome.
And you were in Perth.
Perth, yeah, Perth, Western Australia.
Yeah, that's where the TMDK, Mikey Nichols, Shane Haste, that's where those guys came from. Yeah. If I'm ever afforded the opportunity, I certainly would like to visit Perth. But there's so much, like, there's Sydney, and there's so much else in Australia too that. But Perth, I from what I've seen and what I hear, it's beautiful.
Yeah, no, it really was, and it doesn't seem. Now, I've never been to Sydney, but Sydney seems like such a bigger city.
Yeah.
And that being said, I don't know if they took me to the heart of Perth. I let them do the driving. They did. I'll try to find this video, and if so, I'll link it in the comments. They made a video just to like be fun. And it was called Jeremiah Plunkett Does Australia. And of course, it's to the tune of Land Down Under. And it's them picking me up from the airport, and then they like make a slideshow. When they picked me up, Chris shows up like just as stereotypical as possible. He had like Daisy Duke cutoff shorts, a tank top with like a short sleeve overshirt open, not really a cowboy hat, but like a Paul Hogan hat from Crocodile Dundee, flip flops, and he's got on leashes like a stuffed koala and a stuffed kangaroo. And he's just dragging these through the Perth airport to meet me.
I want to meet that dude.
Oh, he's a blast. You still keep in touch with those guys? Yeah, the way it works, because of the time change, I'll usually get a message in the middle of the night, and I'll respond the next morning as they're going to bed.
Right. It's the as you go to bed message.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked about potentially, going out there again? Maybe this time you flying yourself out there, but taking your wife, and then maybe getting in the ring while you're there?
I know the wife 100% wants to go. So that could be a possibility for sure. We've talked about possibly doing business again because they have opened back up. Shark has opened back up. I hate it. I can't remember. I think it's called Southern Territory Wrestling.
Okay.
Yes, it is Southern Territory Wrestling. But so he's opening back up, and we've talked about it a little bit, but she wants to go so bad that I'm wondering if that might be the deal we have to work out I can stay safe at home.
I mean, happy wife, happy life, right?
Right.
And if you can get booked out of it, I mean, not that I'm trying to tell you what to do here. Our pal NWA Gold said, thanks for the pictures of the ugly Mid-American titles. That was so much fun.
Yeah, the old NWA Main Event titles. They were not the best.
No, they weren't. And again, we only touched on these things briefly, but I mean, you really did wrestle for many of the promotions that represented the NWA in the Mid-South. NWA New South. Of course, the Sawmill, where you were the NWA Southern Television Champion. You were the NWA New South United States Champion. You held many of these titles of the NWA variety in Middle Tennessee, in the Mid-South area. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? The question I guess I'm trying to ask is, you've been wrestling for a long time, but those championship belts definitely mean something. What do those title victories mean to you?
All of them mean something except for maybe that New South US Heavyweight Championship. They had opened a new town, and they wanted a belt for that town, and it was literally a replica belt that said NWA Nowhere on it, and like it was that generic USA belt that they were selling online for a while. Yeah, it was that. So like the fact that even has NWA on it is laughable. I didn't know it did. I never called it that in any promo ever. That's hilarious. But I don't know, man. All of them did like the Southern Tag Team titles, because like Drew and I had a really good run out of it. And, at one point, I think we were one of the better tag teams in the area. The TV title run is what, ended up getting me in my match with Kojima. The Southern title run was kind of on the back end of that. It was after my shoulder surgery. So while I really I enjoy that, I was not at my best physically after that. I gained a whole bunch of weight post shoulder surgery, and I was getting through. But I go back and watch those matches and kind of shake my head. But I was also very busy at that time too, so I kind of weigh it out. I don't know. But the TV title and the tag title runs definitely.
And I will say this, and I mean this as 100% complimentary, so please don't take it any other way. But my God, dude, you look better now than you did when you were wrestling for those titles. Like, you look in great shape. Your face even looks younger now than it did when you were wrestling just a few years ago. I mean, hats off to you for whatever regiment that you're doing. You look great, man, and it makes me feel like you've still got a lot more gas in the tank.
I'm doing it to prolong the gas in the tank, man. I really am. Once I got married, it became more than just about me. So I started getting in shape for health because I honestly thought I was done wrestling. Like, I came back from a neck injury, had 2 matches, then COVID shut the world down. So I was like, I'm probably not going back to wrestling. But I'm like, I got a wife now. Let's get in shape and lose some weight. And I was up to like 320 at one point, and I'm hovering around. The lowest I got was 225, dieted down for the junior heavyweight thing, but I'm hanging out about 250 right now because, man, 225. I don't know if I'm ready to be there yet. I'm getting there, but I got down there pretty quick.
2016, I decided that I was going to kick my ass and get as healthy as I could, and I got all the way to 202, and I was miserable. I mean, I was in the best shape of my life, but I was completely miserable. And, prior to COVID, I was like at 230, 240, and I felt okay about that. Yeah, COVID wasn't kind to me. I need to get back to it. Yeah, man, 225 on your frame, that seems awfully light. Like that's
I got down there for the opportunity. I worked hard too, but I think I did it really fast too. So
what it's all about, keeping that continuity too. Like, you have to have that diet and lifestyle that you could actually keep up for the rest of your life, because the scale goes up and down depending on how active you're being. So, but like I said, man, you look great, and I hope to see you more in the ring. A lot of people might not know this, but in your career, I mean, yes, challenging for the 10 pounds of gold is a pretty amazing thing, but you were a guy that didn't just challenge for the World's Heavyweight Championship. I mean, you were a guy that you challenged for the national title a couple of times, once against Lou Marconi. You weren't just I don't want people to get the idea that you were just a passive guy there. I mean, you were very meaningful for your area. And again, going back to Kojima, like, that's why it made a lot of sense for a fan in Southern California to see you in that title match. But you really were a big part of the NWA in that time frame. And when you look back at those days, you look back at those times, like, what are some of your best memories, and what are things that you're glad that are done?
So best memories, obviously Kojima's in there. Anytime I got to go in there and just make magic with Sean Schultz, that guy, I wish he was still wrestling. I understand why he's not, but like, God, he was so good.
He was good on the mic and in the ring. He was one of those guys. I agree with you. I wish he was still wrestling.
Yeah. And then like with Haskins, now known as the Carnies, but then Team IOU, that was a young up and coming team at the time who, like, they were still learning, but they're putting in more effort than anybody. So like, we had a series with them that, like, we at points legitimately beat the crap out of each other. The matches with the Washington Bullets were always crazy, so I really enjoyed those times. In which you said that, I'm glad they're over. I think it was just the state of the business at the time. Like, it started closing up shop a little bit at that point, but there were at least 5. It's going to sound bad when I say places to work, but there's 5 places to work on Nashville within 2 days. So you would always have at least 2 shows running a night for a while. And we were just fighting over the same fan base. No one wanted to share. You'd get mad at one promoter and go 20 minutes down the street and work for another one. And to the point where I think that's why there's nothing running regularly in Nashville now. I think they burned out the town. You can still draw in Nashville. I mean, you can still have big shows in Nashville, but not every week. And the weekly town, I don't even know is a thing anymore. But Nashville is running weekly towns or weekly shows 2 to 3 days a week, multiple shows a night. It's crazy.
I mean, when you think about just the history of Nashville, it's always been like that. You know, we're talking about in the recent years, but 20 years ago, I mean, that's where TNA was doing all their tapings, was the fairgrounds, and even before then, I mean, Gulas was running out there too. It's always been a very active area, so
Yeah.
it is kind of a bummer that it's not more represented. But I guess it's also a good thing too that you know, you've got places in Memphis and you got places, further east, like Smoky Mountain, that are open for guys to ply their trade. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad that Nashville isn't the way it used to be, but maybe it's best that it isn't.
I think it's best for the entire business that the town's got to cool down. I will say I don't know how many people, if anyone, will run Nashville regularly, just because real estate prices so high in the city right now. It's one of the most booming cities in the world. I don't know if anybody they'll run outside of it, but
yeah, we've looked. When I took my wife to Nashville for the Crockett Cup, I let her go down Broadway, and I had to use a crowbar to get her out of some of those places. She loves it in Nashville, and it's like all right, let's look on Redfin. Let's see. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, you want to go about 20 miles outside of Nashville, then you will start seeing some relief.
Yeah. So then I guess the next question is, of course, you guys will be back in Nashville for some of the tapings, but then you'll be in Knoxville for Always Ready. And, of course, the next night there'll be a television taping. They haven't announced a match for you just yet, but I'm sure the Ill Begotten will be included. What are your hopes for Always Ready?
My hopes for Always Ready, obviously, is to be a part of Always Ready. I want myself and the Ill Begotten, the IB boys, to be represented. Got to have Danny Deals on your screen, man.
He's got the gimmicks.
Yeah, and dude, I love Knoxville. I love East Tennessee. I haven't wrestled there nearly as much as I have West here until recently. But Knoxville's always been historically a great wrestling town. You know, the convention center that we're wrestling in, held Smoky Mountain Wrestling and wrestling before that. So I love when we go into these hallowed halls, like with the Chase. And the fairgrounds to an extent, it's the new building. Oh God, I wish it would have been in the old building. That was my forget the pun, because this is what they called it, but that was my Mecca. You know what I mean? Before it was the Asylum, it's called the Mecca, and it was just, that was my place. That's where I went to see wrestling. That's when, I always set goals for myself early on.
Yeah.
And it was have your first match. Cool. Then the next goal was to wrestle at the fairgrounds. I still remember the first night I wrestled at the fairgrounds, to the point where wrestled, show ended, left, didn't even think about getting paid. My manager called me. He's like, "Why didn't you stay and get paid?" He goes, I didn't even think about it. I just wrestled in the fairgrounds. I just left. I just went home.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame you. That place was beautiful. I got to be there for the 70th anniversary show.
Yeah.
Nick and Cody. It was just remarkable that the venue looks so. I'm surprised they shut it down. I don't know about the back. I don't know how it works. I don't know how bad the property was, but it was perfect for pro wrestling. That's for sure.
It was built for pro wrestling. 100%. They had run in some other buildings on that because their original arena burnt down in a fire, if I'm remembering the story right. And they wouldn't do anything to fix it. So wrestling threatened to move. And to keep wrestling from moving, they signed a contract and promised they'd build a building for wrestling to be held in.
It was a great venue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, and then of course, they returned to Nashville at the Skyline Studios. So again, a lot of wrestling still in the Tennessee area, and that's kind of like your. I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes, but it feels like that might be the new home for the NWA. It seems like maybe Atlanta is a thing of the past.
That I don't know, man. I get the emails about where we're going. If they made it the new home, being from Middle Tennessee, living in Middle Tennessee, I'd love it. I enjoy waking up in my own bed. But but that being said, I don't know any details on that. I do know Skyline was awesome to work with.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoyed our time at Skyline. Skyline was great.
Well, I mean, I guess we should probably wrap it up here because I only meant to have you on for an hour, but I feel like we could probably make this a weekly thing, and that would be all right. I do appreciate your time today. Is there anything you want to plug before we end the podcast?
Guys, just keep continuing to support the NWA, whether it's through our All Access Annual Pass or over on YouTube, and come out to Always Ready. As far as my stuff, he said he's got it linked down. I appreciate him linking that. I've got some T-shirts and pro wrestling tees. I've also got a storefront tier at storefrontier.com/Plunky's Gimmick Table. And I do my own podcast. It's not nearly as professional as this one, but it's called the Territorial Wrestling Review. Me and one of my old mentors, Quentin Charisma, we just get together once a week and we watch old wrestling. And it's kind of a watch along, so you can like play it. And we link the YouTube videos. And sometimes, and we don't pre-watch them. We just look for interesting titles and pick it. So sometimes it's terrible.
So I have links on the site, a link to your Weebly page, your website, your pro wrestling, Pro Wrestling ENT, Pro Wrestling Tees, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, and then I have if you guys go to YouTube, you can click the link that has a search of Jeremiah Plunkett matches on YouTube, and then of course there's a link where you can just click on news about Jeremiah Plunkett from alliance-wrestling.com, so you can see some of the older articles that we wrote about what JP was doing back in the day, winning Australian titles, and and living the life of a true world-renowned wrestler. JP, Jeremiah Plunkett, thanks so much for being on here, man. I do appreciate it. I'm going to try to check out that podcast. What was it again? The Territorial
Wrestling with an R, how it should be spelled, review.
Yes. All right, man. That's awesome. I'm going to take a look. Until next time, we'll see you guys at the matches. Have a good night. Of course, make sure if you didn't tune into Power tonight, you check it out on Friday. And I'm stalling here where I'm looking for the show close. And no one has ever called the show professional before, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And,
wait till you hear this podcast, and you'll know why.
And that'll do it for us. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of alliance-wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you'll never miss a future episode? I'd also like to remind you we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. before NWA Power. You can find us on social media at The Alliance Blog. And until next time, we are The Alliance.